I went to the White House recently with pastors. I also went to the Israel embassy. I was invited there twice, and I met the ambassador of Israel, and they showed us the unfiltered clip. I watched 45 minutes of the actual camera from the Hamas. Israel was minding their own business, and they always are. There's been 6 wars, and Israel had nothing to do with either one of them. Israel has only wanted peace. All Israel wants to do is to live like the rest of the nations.
Today, we're joined by one of the most outspoken Christian voices defending Israel today. At a time when anti-Semitism is rising around the world, churches are divided over Israel, college campuses are erupting with anti-Israel protests, and even some of the biggest conservative voices in America are questioning their support for the Jewish state. Reverend Jordan Wells has stepped directly into the debate. He's the author of God Stands with Israel, a book that argues God has not abandoned Israel. Modern anti-Semitism has simply changed its language, and many Christians have misunderstood what the Bible actually teaches about God's covenant with the Jewish people. Today, we're discussing the biggest questions facing Christians in Israel. Reverend Jordan Wells, welcome to Stand Tall Israel.
Thank you so much. I'm honored anytime I get to defend the Jewish people. It goes beyond politics for me. So it hits directly into my faith as a pastor and as a Christian. So I'm very honored to be on any pro-Israel show.
Thank you. Thank you. Reverend, in your estimation, why do you think it is that one tiny country with fewer than 10 million people are hated more than almost any other nation on earth?
Well, I'm going to use I'm going to give you 2 answers to that. First of all, is I believe, and part of my faith as a Christian, we believe in Satan. And we believe that there are 2 forces in this world. There's a God, and for us, we believe that to be Jesus Christ, but we also believe there's a devil. And the devil hates the Jewish people. Now, you know why? The reason he hates the Jewish people is because they defeated him like no other nation has ever done, and they humiliated him. Let's just be honest. Based off the Christian Bible, they humiliated him. He didn't know Jesus was going to come the way he did. He didn't know that. And not only just before Jesus, even in their Torah, the Jewish Bible, they defeated him time and time again, whether that was through them getting out of Egyptian bondage or whatever you want to use. I mean, this nation was supposed to be wiped out many times. He thought he had Israel on the ropes many times, and they always come back stronger than ever. We saw that with one temple destroyed. We saw with the second temple destroyed, and they still find a way to multiply and to become stronger. Then that's the spiritual point of view. The secular point of view is that they're jealous as well. Jewish people are just very successful. No matter what you put them through, even before the Holocaust, Jewish people were in some of the top positions in whatever nation they go to, whether it's banking, finance, Hollywood. It's not that there's some Jewish cabal to run the world. These are just favored people. These are people favored, I believe, by God, but they're also culturally, they keep their culture precious, right? The things that they keep in their Torah. And because I believe their Torah is still inspired by God, which is the problem with some Christians, they demonize the Old Testament. And they almost have this sense of, which part of it's replacement theology, but this also notion that the Old Testament is this old book that we no longer as Christians need to care about. But I always teach people, you cannot understand the New Testament until you understand the Old Testament. The Old Testament reveals Christ, and we believe what the Bible says, and then they'll use, well, Jewish people don't believe in Christ. Well, that's okay. They don't have to in order for them to still have the covenant that I'm talking about, because the reality is without the Jewish people, we wouldn't have the Bible. We wouldn't have, you can't go into the Bible without reading Israel. Israel is mentioned throughout Scripture more than the word Christ. And so we have a problem in Christianity if we're trying to disconnect Jewish people in Israel from the Bible. You can't do it. And so that's 2 reasons, very sum up, is that they're spiritually, the devil is jealous. It hates the Jewish people. But then secondly, people in the natural are jealous. Yes, they're small. Yes, they're small in number. But how is a nation that went through the Holocaust, the worst event, to me, the worst event in human history, that was hell on earth for literally as long as it was hell on earth. I've studied history. There's not many events that were like the Holocaust as far as their depravity and how a whole nation literally decided that they were going to suspend their humanity and knew that Jewish people were being disrobed, and not just men and women, but children were being put in gas chambers and ovens. That is the most wicked, dark part of human history. And that was when we want to talk about genocide, there's no genocide that comes close to the genocide that the Jews went through many years ago. So, and it's not even many years ago, because if you want to be honest, there's still Jewish people that are older alive now that can tell us about the Holocaust. This was not an event that happened 1,000 years ago. This happened within a generation. There are people alive that were in Auschwitz that can tell you what happened, that have the marks on their skin with the numbers. And of course, they're dying off, unfortunately, but there's still some that are remaining. And every year I watch the videos to remind myself. And I go back and watch those horrible Holocaust videos that I hate watching, but I go back to remind myself why I must fight for the Jewish people. And yeah, so that's the long answer of why there's so much of that.
Mhm. Now, it seems like Israel dominates the world's attention while you have Christians slaughtered in Sudan and Nigeria, and the media doesn't even want to cover that. What would you say to the selectivity of the media of where their outrage is?
Well, it's purposeful, man. It's purposeful because, first of all, Jewish clickbait is one of the most popular things on the internet, right? I read a lot of Jewish, and unfortunately, Elon Musk and X. I love X, but even on X is like that. That's supposed to be more geared toward where conservatives can talk. But even on there, if I put it in the Zionists, right? If I put a comment that says God loves the Jews, that comment would not go as far as saying the Jews are evil and they're trying to take over the world, right? The algorithm would push the Jewish propaganda, and I would go more viral saying that than if I said God love. So a lot of people who are in the media, whether it's Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly now, Candace Owens, these people are viral. These people are addicted to views. And so they saw the wave of what was coming, and they're riding the wave. Megyn Kelly is getting amazing views, but it's not from Republicans. It's not from conservatives mostly. It's from the international audience. Internationally, people hate Jews, right? This is an international thing, right? This is Europe. It has the anti-Semitism problem. You have parts of all across the Middle East, right? There's not one Middle Eastern nation besides a few that are okay with Jews. Most of those Muslim countries hate Jewish people, and they're taught that from a child. So you have just a little population in America, and then Israel, and then pockets around the world. But most of the world hates Jewish people. So of course you're going to tap into an international audience by saying something bad about the Jews, and that's why the media has begun, because we don't have the morals that we used to have. And I tell people like this: if we said the things we say about Jews about Black people, and I'm a Black person, but if I said that there's a Blacks conspiracy, that Black people and Africans are trying to take over the world, they're all the synagogue of Satan, and they are. Could you imagine the outrage from the left? Could you imagine the media meltdown? They would be calling white supremacy. They would be saying this is unacceptable. We need to pass hate speech laws to stop this assault on Black people. But yet we have normalized anti-Semitism. Like, it's normal to go on TV and say the Jewish people are a genocidal nation. The nation of Israel is a genocidal nation that doesn't have a right to exist. That you could go on CNN and say that and not stop you. Like that should cut you off right there. Because first of all, the nation of Israel is its people. And even if you disagree with Benjamin Netanyahu, which I don't, because I think he could have had a few things better, but I know that BB loves his people and he's protecting his people. And I don't know how it feels to go through the Holocaust, but the Jewish peoples do. And just like Black people want to protect their culture when they went through slavery, that's how Israel and Jewish people feel going through the Holocaust. So of course, a lot of Jewish people keep voting Bibi back in because they want somebody who's going to fight for them. You have to understand, it's them against the world. And some people might not like Bibi's methods, but one thing they know about Bibi is the reason we voted for Trump in America. They know there's a lot of people who don't like Trump's methods. They don't like Trump's rhetoric. But they like one thing about what put Trump back in office is they like that he feels like that he's going to fight for them. That's why Bibi has been in power so long. Because they might say he's a little much, but the people know that he will go up against the international community. He will go up against the America. He will go up against anybody to make sure they exist. And it's Israel against the world. And that's what Israel people know and Jewish people know. And that's the lens you have to look at it from as a conservative. You have to look at it from their lens. You have to empathize with Jewish people. Put yourself in the position where you went through the Holocaust, where your people, your great-grandparents didn't even know. I heard stories of the Holocaust where these people, parents went off into the Holocaust. They never saw them again. That's their whole generation was erased. They have nothing from their parents. They have nothing. And I know just like, and this is one thing I would say this, and this is a little, I'm so crazy when I see a black Jewish hater, because a lot of anybody who should know what the Jewish people have been through, it should be black people. And that's why during the civil rights movement, the blacks and the Jews are like this, because we both know what it feels like to experience racial discrimination. We both know what it feels like. That's why the biggest supporters of the civil rights movement were Jews. It wasn't because they were trying to control the civil rights movement. It's because they looked at how those black people were being treated, and they said, no, we know what that looks. We know how it feels to be run out of your nation. We know how it feels to be in a nation and not have rights. That's why the Jewish people marched with Martin Luther King through the streets and founded the NAACP and gave millions of their own money and were spit on and cussed and called out of their name for standing with those black people. And so if any black person comes across these videos, you need to understand and I had Leo Terrell, who's in the Trump administration, share a post I made about that. I broke down the long hit, and I wrote about it in my book. The book I wrote a whole chapter on the civil rights movement that people should get and listen and read, especially if you're African American. You need to get that part, because I talk about the history of the civil rights movement and I break down everything. The civil rights movement would not have lasted without the Jewish people. Without Israel, we wouldn't have had a Martin Luther King. We wouldn't have had a double NAACP. Black Americans ought to be ashamed of themselves. The NAACP and places like that, and sit by and watch our Jewish brothers and sisters be treated like this. It's disgusting.
Yeah. I want to know what your reaction was to October 7th and what shocked you more. Was it the attack itself or the world's reaction afterwards, the West backing Hamas and all that stuff that went on?
I think for me, I went to the White House recently with pastors, but I also went to the Israel embassy. I was invited there twice. And I met the ambassador of Israel. And they showed pastors, they take a tour of pastors, evangelicals there often. But they showed us the Unfiltered clip recently. It was literally like 6 months ago. Well, not even that long ago, like 4 months ago, I saw the Unfiltered clip. I had seen clips online when it happened. But no, I watched the real thing. I watched 45 minutes of the actual camera from the Hamas, which I told he needs to release it. He's turned it into a movie. They need to remind the world what happened, why this war is going on, why Gaza happened. Because if people can refresh, see, at first people were kind of upset, but then they shifted right to Jew hatred, right? Maybe the Jews had something to do with this, why they were attacked, right? And I want to paint a picture for the people, right? Israel was minding their own business, as they always are. There's been 6 wars, and Israel had nothing to do with either one of them. If they were restarted the nation, there's been about 6 wars. There's been a lot of wars, and Israel, and Candace Owens, an advocate Nazi Jew hater, has said that with Israel, we'll never have peace on the earth. As long as Israel exists, we'll never have peace. Israel has only wanted peace. All Israel wants to do is to live like the rest of the nations, live in their little small homeland that's no bigger than Indiana, and enjoy life like everybody else. Their democracy. That's all Jews want. They want to start their families, worship God, and do their own thing. But 5 times, Islam and Muslims, because they are taught to hate Jews, not all Muslims, but the radical ones that have been taught since they were children, which is a lot of the Middle East, Jewish people from the river to the sea, that Jews are supposed to be wiped out. There's many Muslims who can attest to that, who have made videos that went viral. There's one pastor who came and preached to us at one of the faith events. He was a Muslim, and he said it from personal experience that he was taught as a child to hate Israel, that they were taught in schools to hate Israel, and that Israel has to be destroyed. So Hamas drops in and commits the worst atrocity against Jews since the Holocaust. We don't understand the scale of how bad it was because Israel's a very small nation. So the amount of people that were killed would have been the equivalent of somebody coming to the United States and doing a mass murder of 30,000 Americans or something like that. That's what that would have looked like. Now, we know what the American did when 9/11 happened, right? 9/11 happens, and this is what I get these woke right people, right, that want to accuse Israel of genocide, but they don't remember what Bush did. When 9/11 happened, how the American launched hellfire and brimstone on the Middle East, and how most Americans supported it, by the way, at the time, because America could not believe this happened in our country. I remember when I was a kid watching it on the television, people breaking out in tears in the middle of the classroom. You know, people couldn't imagine on the land of the free in our greatest city, people jumping out of buildings because these radical Muslims crashed a plane into our building. So that's what happened to Israel. The Middle East launched a long-term war. Bush called it the war on terror, right? That lasted a very, very long time, and the entire Middle East was blown up because of it. Now, people would be mad at Bush, but Bush was doing what was in the best interest of his country. Those people deserved it to pay for what they did. And Bibi is doing the same thing for his people and for his country. And so I am not surprised that the October 7th happened because I know my Bible, I know my history, and I know the way Jews have been hated, and I know why. So I wasn't surprised, and I know who the Muslims are. You know, I'm not one of those people who are ignorant about who Islam is. Islam is a religion of hate. Now, I'm not saying that about any religion that's not Christianity. Jewish people, and I always tell people this, if Israel laid down all their weapons right now, there would be no Israel. Tomorrow, if Israel said we're going to we'll get rid of our military because we want to have peace like y'all want peace. We're going to get rid of our military, all our weapons. There will be no Israel tomorrow. If all the Muslim nations dropped their weapons, there will still be Muslim nations and no nation will be touched. That's what we're dealing with. And so I'm not surprised. I did not expect it to happen as fast as it did with the college campuses, but I am surprised at how many young people have embraced anti-Semitism. It's even a problem in the Republican Party, which is crazy. It's a small problem, but it's happening among our youth. We have Candace right here where I'm working, Fishback, you know, who's a anti-Semite and who's very popular with some of the conservative youth. Because even some of the conservative and 80% of Republicans still support Israel, but they're more the middle-aged, older people. When you look into the statistics of the younger Republicans, that changes from about 40-60. 60% are against Israel, 40% are for them. So you see a shift happening where the older generation still stands to guard Israel, but the younger generation who didn't get to see the Holocaust, that only have been felt the propaganda from their schools that Israel is an oppressor nation, but the same group also hates America, right? A lot of them are anti-American, anti-capitalism, and that's why we're up against the DSA and the stuff we're up against now, because this is anti-American. And I tell people this, to be anti-Israel, to be anti-American. And we can go into that eventually, but to be anti-Israel, to be anti-American, you cannot be America first and against Israel. And I talk about that in my book. You cannot call yourself an America first fighter and be against Israel, because Israel was literally, we are a Judeo-Christian nation. We've always been that way. Our founding, if I broke that down in my book as well, that if you go through the history of America, Judaism is all throughout. From the founding of our laws, our founding fathers founded our laws off of the Old Testament, not the New. They looked at the Torah and they started to go through our whole judicial system was built off the Torah and the laws. Early in the beginning of America, it was even stricter, like death penalties and things for certain things that were in the Old Testament. The founders thought that they were like the Jews and that America was a type of Israel. So that is how much our founders, they were not anti-Semitic. They loved the Jewish people, and they were a people that loved the Jews. You can just see it throughout our founding. And we've always stood with Israel. And without America, Israel wouldn't have been founding. We were one of the biggest people who fought for the founding. When Israel left the Nazis and all that happened, America and our president at the time wanted to make sure Israel had a homeland. And and that's why I believe God has blessed America. If you look at when Israel became a nation and how we helped us, we became blessed. America took over as the greatest superpower. And I believe the blessings of America is connected to how we treated Israel. And I believe, because the Bible said, if you bless those, I will bless those who bless Israel. And people, that's the Old Testament. The Old Testament is still written by God. So it's not like God did not write the Old Testament. It doesn't matter if it's the Old Testament. It's still God written. It's still anointed by God. He wrote it he went up Moses, the prophet Moses, the hand and finger of God wrote the 10 Commandments. And Christians, if we believe that, we have to abide by that. So that's the short answer.
Now, Zoran Mamdani has said that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested if he comes to New York. There was a whole fuss about this. He can't legally do it. But what concerns you most about his rhetoric? What message does that send to Jewish Americans, to Zionists, and anybody who doesn't have Mamdani's views?
Well, I think the Jewish people all over, any Zionist, any Jewish person, they need to never vote Democrat ever again. And what's crazy is the Jewish people mostly vote Democrat up until recently. That's just how it's been, and it's changing. Of course, we saw one of the biggest Jewish people in the country, which is the guy Alan Dershowitz, who was a huge Democrat, social Obama, become a Republican. And I don't know how anybody who is a Jew could vote for. And we have some liberal Jews who was Jews for Mamdani. I thought it was the most insane thing I had ever seen. He hates who you are. Jews were just killed in New York, and he didn't even go to the press conference. You're the mayor. And when they had you're the face of New York. That's where he should have been to cool out the Jewish, to make a start that we are not accepting this, and we're going to prosecute you to the full extent of the law. When terrorists, that's what they are, came into Jewish neighborhoods, chanting to the river to the sea and all these anti-Semitic things, he didn't say anything. But if it was toward the gay community, if a bunch of Christians came into a gay community and were threatening to kill gays and were threatening to all that, it would be hellfire and brimstone from his administration. He would be on every press conference talking about, we're not going to accept this hate crime, these hate speech. But yet for the Jews, it's open season. And that's because Mamdani is a when they call him a terrorist, I'm going to call him a terrorist supporter. And if you want to campaign with terrorist supporters, we were trying to tell people this. See, a lot of the things that we told people, they didn't believe it. But the Americans, unfortunately, some of us, we need to learn the hard way. And I hope we don't learn the hard way before it's too late, right? That we told everybody, conservative people were saying he's an anti-Semite. He got Nazi type leanings. Wants to globalize the Antifada, and people were just thought it was Republican rhetoric. So Mamdani is in a situation where he campaigned as a anti-Semite. He campaigned that he was going to arrest Mamdani. See, the DSA has become a Nazi party. I tell them they're like the Democrat Nazi Party, the socialists. I mean, honestly, the people that just were elected in New York are some of the most radical candidates I've ever seen. These people said they will wipe their nose with the American flag. These people have some of the most anti-Semitic things that you could say. The reason that Dan Goldman, I believe, lost was because he was Jewish. Period. He didn't say anything radical. He didn't say any radical thing. He didn't say, I support the war in Gaza. I believe all of them deserve him. As a Jew, there'll be like me as a black person defending black people, right? He, as a Jew, said, listen, this anti-Semitism should be accepted. That was enough in New York. And that's why Hakeem Jeffries, AOC won't say anything, because they know that their base have lost their mind. They know that these young people especially hate Jews with everything in their spirit. And so what they do is act like they don't see it. But the Jewish people need to know they don't have a friend in the Democratic Party. And I thank God for the leadership of President Trump, because he has kicked the Nazis out of our party. And that's really what it was, the war over with all this recently. There was a wing of the Republican Party that became Nazis as well, led by Tucker and led by Candace. And I'm not talking about disagreement on foreign policy, right? I'm not saying to be a conservative or Republican, you have to agree with Israel, or you have to love Israel. You have to be like me concerning Israel. But we should have a baseline understanding in our party that no racism and no anti-Semitism is going to be accepted on a national level. We're not going to endorse candidates that run on anti-Semitism. That's not okay. And so that's what Trump has done. They made Iran about Jews. And they're saying things like Iran has nothing to do with America, that it was Bibi's war, and that the Jews are controlling America. And like Israel wants to be in war. They really think that Israel just wants to be in war. I just believe that the Jewish people are tired, right? And they are people. You have to understand, the Jews have done everything for peace. They've been willing to try to give up land. They've done a two-state solution. They try to do everything they can to appease these radical Muslims, and it has not worked. So the Jews are to dang if they do, if they don't. Whatever they do, they're the enemy. If they backed out now, within 6 months, you would have probably another attack by Hamas or one of their proxies would do another attack. Because the reality of it is, we have forgotten who the terrorists are and who the good guys are in America. You got people marching for Hamas, Palestine. There's never been a Palestine. What are you talking about, Palestine? There's never been a Palestine. Israel is not a colonizer nation. That's Israel's land. It's been Israel's land before America was even thought of. Israel is one of the oldest religions, and they've been around for a very long time, and that land was given to Abraham. God gave Abraham the deed to the land. David had his glorious city there. Solomon was there before a Muslim was thought about. Before Muhammad ever was born, the Jewish people were there. And so I just think, we just gotta understand, and we gotta continue to get out, because it really is ignorance is what we're dealing with. I watched the video and the debates online, and what you see is a ignorance. People are very ignorant about any of the stuff I just said. People really believe that Palestine was there before Israel was. People really believe Palestine was a real place that Israel came and took over and oppresses every. But I tell people, Israel's the freest place in the Middle East. You couldn't go nowhere else in the Middle East and have the life you have in Israel. Israel has a government that people who are Muslim and Arab in front can be on. You can be a part of their Congress. You know, you can hold police positions. You can hold. That's not a colonizer. What they do and what Islam do is colonize. They go in Egypt. All those places were once Christian nations with some of the oldest churches. And Islam came in and killed all the Christians and made them convert to Islam or ran them out in a lot of those places. So that's it.
Yeah. I believe you devote a chapter of your book to Tucker Carlson. Millions of Christians trust Tucker Carlson, I guess from his days at Fox. How dangerous is his rhetoric? Do you think that he's misleading a lot of Christians about Israel? What are your thoughts on him?
I, like many other people, I used to love Tucker Carlson. I grew up listening. I mean, I went in politics when I first got in politics. I loved Tucker. I was watching him. He has great debates. He had great debates with people. He would bring on leftists, and he was a very good, voice for the conservative movement, just like Candace Owens was as well. And it breaks my heart. And now even making Kelly, and it breaks my heart because those are valuable voices that we have lost. But new voices are coming in, right? But it's sad. But I think one thing that Christians have to learn and conservatives have to learn is that Tucker Carlson has went down a dark path, not just on Israel, on a lot of subjects. He had a socialist on his show pushing that Jesus is a socialist. And so he's gone down a liberal path. And now he's agreed, Thomas Massey the same way. Because Israel, I tell people, anti-Semitism is a dark, you know how when people get into depression and pornography and things like that, it's a dark path. When people start meditating on anti-Semitism, it takes you to a dark place. It drove Hitler crazy, right? Hitler got more insane the more he started to get into the Jewish conspiracies. And Hitler really believed that the Jews were the issue to the world's problem. And that's how you get there, though. And Tucker is there. I honestly believe that Tucker hates Jews and thinks about them every day of the week. I believe the only thing he cares about in life is the annihilation of the Jewish people. I think for most of these people, it is beyond, we don't want to fund them, right? I just don't agree. It's deeper because if Israel was not being funded by America, they don't want to just cut off funding. They don't want us to have a partnership with Israel. They want us to hate Israel like other nations hate Israel. And what's crazy about that is whether you agree with the war in Iran or not, Israel is the only nation that has stood with us regardless. We have one of the best diplomatic relationships with Israel. And that's just the case. Europe, our own allies wouldn't even help us in this war. Their right door, our next door neighbor, wouldn't even help us, wouldn't even let us use their bases to help with this war against the terrorists. So Israel has been our only friend. And the fact that we have conservatives and people call themselves conservatives, like when Rokan went over there and made a fool of himself, basically saying in so many words, he was detained. He went over there to stir up his anti-Semitic base. He has a very anti-Semitic base. And now the new way to rise the Democratic Party is to see who can be the most anti-Semitic. Not who has the better solutions to fix America, but who can be the most anti-Semitic. That's what's going on in our elections now. In the Democratic Party, in some states, it is literally anti-Semitism that can get you in office in the Democratic Party. And that's just disgusting, man. You're running on racism. You're running on the hatred of a people that they can't do nothing about being Jewish. They were born that way. It's just like racism with black people or racism toward white people. You can't help why you were born. and we're blaming American Jews for what we feel like is happening in Israel. There are people who are Jewish who have never even been to Israel who live in America. There are people in New York who are being attacked for Israel and they've never even visited Israel. Or they're liberal Jews and they're still being attacked. So it has much more to do than just Tucker Carlson is why Jewish people are being attacked. Here, actually, some of the conservative, so-called conservative anti-Semites are worse than liberal, right? Because the liberals still support their side, right? You know, people who are anti-Jew on the liberal side, they'll still push for conservative values. I mean, liberal values in the midst of that. Tucker has literally abandoned conservatism. He has abandoned talks about our border. He doesn't care about our border no more. He doesn't talk against Mamdani at all. When Mamdani was running, Tucker said he actually said some nice things about Mamdani. He said nice things about when the guy Plattner exited, Tucker said was mad about it. He said that this was the AIPAC lobbyists behind Plattner having to leave. You know, apparently AIPAC told Plattner to rape that girl. That's where he is. And he's dangerous. And he's a sick man. And if you're watching him, you're going to get the sickness. And that's what I tell people, anti-Semitism is contagious. It's contagious. It's like a contagion. Look at how it was with Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly wasn't anti-Semitic at first. She was on the PragerU when it first started. She was, as Tucker was getting darker and darker, she was on PragerU. She was still defending Jews in Israel. But little by little, when that war intensified between this, in the conservative movement, she decided to choose anti-Semitism because these people are independent journalists and they make money off YouTube views. They make money off of views. How many views they're getting that they sell to their ad people who buy ad spaces? They get 50,000 views, 100,000 views. So that's what Megyn chose. She gave up her integrity and her conservative values for clicks. And I never thought that Ben Shapiro would become my favorite conservative. When I first got into conservative movement, Ben Shapiro was like a rhino apparently. He was like a moderate. Now he's like my new Charlie Kirk. I just love Ben Shapiro. And I'm like, I have more in common with Ben Shapiro than I do the radicals. I guess I'm more like a rhino now. I don't know. I guess I'm like, I like Nikki Haley more than I do some of these other right wingers. I just like politics have changed. I'm now agreeing with Nikki Haley 80% of the time. And it's just like I used to be consider myself far right. I guess I'm in the middle now of the right. Because I don't hate Israel. And I don't think that the war in Iran is stupid. And I do think that America should not just be an isolationist nation, that we should forget about the rest of the world. That I don't think America first means we have to give up our greatest ally and hate Israel. So that's kind of my thing on Tucker. He's a danger. And I think for me, conservatism has changed. And even after the 2020 election, which you have a whiles away, but there's going to be a new reforming after Trump leaves of what the Republican Party is going to look like under either the J.D. or Rubio. We're going to have to make a decision as a party because those people are going to try to come back. They're waiting for Trump to leave. And they hope they have a friend in J.D. Tucker's still hoping. And what scares me about J.D. Vance, and I'm not going to get into J.D., but he has never really condemned Tucker Carlson. And he never really condemned anti-Semitism, to be honest. And it's like he's straddling the fence. And that's concerning because I can't support an anti-Semitic party. I won't. And I love politics. And I love the Republican Party because I believe they're the only shot we have. But I will not support anti-Semitism. I just will not do it. I will not support any candidate that is pushing hatred for anybody for their race, whether it's Black people or Jewish people or white people. I just want to do it. It goes against my Christian beliefs. And I tell people, if you're a Christian, you should be against hate regardless. I mean, we're not going to even get into the, can you be a Christian and hate Israel? Let's just focus on the teaching of Jesus. Jesus said, love your enemy as yourself. Love your neighbor. That was the core teaching of Christ, is love. He said, how would the world know me? By love. So he didn't say love everybody except Jewish people. That's not in the Bible. So as a Christian, let's not even get into our Jews, the chosen people. Let's just get into the fact that Christians should be against racism. Christians should be fighting against race, just like we were fighting against the abolitionist movement. We're led by Christians. In America, when slavery was going on, it was the Christians that started these abolitionist movements to free Black people, right? It was their Christian faith that drove them to say slavery is wrong because God created all of us equal. And that same spirit should be in Christians today to say God created the Jewish people and he loves them regardless of the sins of their past, because we're all sinners.
Now, you brought up PragerU. Candace Owens had her own show on PragerU. She worked for Dennis Prager, then she worked for Ben Shapiro, and then she went off on her own, just started hating on Israel, and then that hate turned into hate of Jews. And then she's thrown out these conspiracy theories about Jewish people, about Charlie Kirk being killed by Israel and all these things. How, dangerous is Candace Owens? And not just Candace Owens, her conspiracy theories, which often end up blaming Israel and the Jews.
Well, Candace is just, I don't know who's worse, her or Tucker. Candace is pretty bad, and Candace is just in a dark place. I think she's actually more worse than Tucker, to be honest, because Tucker is just, deranged with Jewish hatred, but Candace is more dangerous because Candace has no red lines. Tucker has some, not, if you attack a widow like she's attacking Eric Kirk, you have no moral. I don't think you're a good person. I don't think you're anything good about you. Like, I don't think Candace has any good qualities at this point. I don't think that she's any better than any evil liberal person that wants the destruction of America. Like, I don't care about her past. She's evil to me. Not just because she disagrees with Israel, but because she just is a bad person. Like, it's a bad person that attacks a widow for a year, almost a year straight. That a woman that was grieving her husband, a woman that, just as a mother, you should have more decency than that. If her husband died, God forbid, and she's trying to put together the pieces of her life after her husband, and her husband makes most of the money, she don't really make as much money. When she goes bankrupt, it's going to affect her husband more than it's going to affect her, right? That's why if I was her husband, we'd be arguing, because I'm like, she has 2 lawsuits against her. They're not going to come for her money, just her money. They're going to come for all his money. And so Candace literally if her husband died, imagine your wife dies or your husband dies, you have to, one of the most known voices of your husband that was connected to your husband's vision is literally accusing you of killing your own husband. And Erica's doing the best she can to keep his memory alive. She's doing the best she can to manage this global movement called Turning Point, which is probably very hard. I've never been run a multi-million-dollar business that was one of the most powerful conservative engines in the Republican Party because of their influence, their ability. I mean, we wouldn't have won the 2024 election without Turning Point. The work they did with youth on the campuses and their ground game and what they were doing with her, especially with Charlie Kirk. So she knows that. And the thing, she's trying to run that, she's still raising children that now are fatherless. She's a single mom. She probably never thought about this. One day she could be a single mother. And yet she has to deal with Candace every day saying, Turned out Tyler Robinson didn't kill. Before the facts came out, Tyler Robinson had nothing to do with it. It was Israel. It was the Jews. It was Erica Kirk. They all were in a conspiracy. They got together. Charlie loved me more than he loved his wife. He secretly I was just much closer to him than the woman he said I wanted to marry. If he wanted Candace Owens, he probably could have asked her when he had the chance. He wanted Erica. He married Erica. That is the closest woman to him and ever would be and ever will be. That's a woman he chose to leave everything to. That's the woman he gave his DNA to, his name, his children. And she's attacking that. So, yeah, Candace is dangerous. They have documentaries coming out on her. I did one on her. I don't know if it ever come out, but I will continue to speak against it. I have Candace Owens fatigue. I think we all do. I'm so tired of Candace Owens. I spent like 6 months straight going after her. And I just got exhausted because she relishes in it. I just think she's a narcissist. She loved the attention. When Charlie Kirk died, she immediately made his death about her. When the conservative movement should have been joining together and people should have been mourning Charlie, she immediately turned his death into a big drama party. Mussolini died. Everything, 3 days went past, a week went past, and immediately the conspiracy started coming. She couldn't even respect him enough to wait a few months to let people grieve properly before she started with her nonsense. And so this is where we are.
Yeah. Now, one of your chapters is titled Israel Brain Rot. What does that mean? Can hatred become addictive? Can obsession with Israel become someone's identity?
Yeah, I talk about something I've studied as I've studied Jewish history and I've studied American history and just history. I'm a historic guy. I love history. I taught history as a teacher. I'm very, I believe if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. History is one of our best teachers. There's nothing better that teaches you better than history. And one thing I've learned about anti-Semitism is that it's brain rot. It makes very smart people seem very dumb. That's why I call it brain rot. Because I know some very educated, smart people. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, it makes them dumb. I know people who are very strong conservatives online. I see people who are very strong conservatives who really think they love America, but they would willingly vote for a Democrat who hates America just because they hate Israel. So the Israel hatred is the only position that matters to them. It means more to them than our borders. It means more to them than the fact that the left is pushing communism. It means more to them than things that Israel, regardless of how you feel about Israel, Israel is thousands of miles away from us. Israel doesn't have any impact on your day-to-day life. But their minds are so warped that they believe that everything wrong in their life it goes back to Israel. Whatever area they're not happy in, whatever area they're unsuccessful in, they blame the Jewish people and Israel for whatever that is. And that is brain rot. That is not using what makes conservatives why I'm a conservative is that we are the party, we're the people that we can have debate. We know, like what you're bringing me on the show to talk. See, the left doesn't do much of this, right? They're in an incubator chamber where they cannot have serious conversations about things. What makes conservatism different is that we talk, we debate. We're like Charlie Kirk. We like to talk to people that think different than us. Like Bill Maher said, Republicans always choose to come on this show, right? Because we don't mind talking to people because we know our views are right. You know why we know our views are right? Because they're conservative. They've stood the test of time. Our views are right because we can see the fruit of them in the fact that when conservatives build nations, they last. when we build help, because conservatism is about love for your country. Conservative values about family, faith, right? Jewish brain rot doesn't care about those things anymore. Jewish brain rot says Israel is all I care about. I don't care. And then when you try to have these debates with the intellect, I've had them, man. I've had people reach out to me or Christians, and I try to have respectful dialogue with them, and they immediately go to name calling. It immediately becomes you're a Zionist B word or F word, or it's not intellectual. It's people who you would think would be able to, we have an intellectual conversation without profanity. They can't even do it because it's rot their brain. It's like a sick, deformed brain where all things aren't firing clearly. They immediately start cussing you out. I watch a lot of debates because I subscribe to a lot of Jewish shows on my YouTube, on my Instagram. And I watch these pro-Zionist people go on college campuses, and immediately the people will say, you're supporting Israel. No, there's no conversation to be had. Like, it's rot. We're in a college university where we're supposed to be able to have intellectual debate. That's what college is about. Using your brain power. Not with these people who have brain rot. They can't use their brain. Their brain has been deteriorated. They only know Israel is a genocidal nation. They're evil. They're beyond redeemable. And if you're Jewish, you're a part of that. That is brain rot. You can never group all people together. All black people aren't the same. That's why I tell my conservatives who want to get online and say crazy things about black people. I'm like, a lot of black people have commit crime, but all black people aren't criminals, right? Jewish people all don't even think the same. Jewish people aren't a monolith, right? All Jews don't agree with Israel. They're conservative Jews. There are liberal Jews. There are Christian Zionist Jews, right? There are Jews that are Christians, right? And I know people don't think there are, but there is a messianic population in Israel of people or Jews who are giving their life to, who have chosen to go become Christians. I know a few famous ones that are on Daystar, and they literally Sid Roth and what's his name? What's that guy's name? Rabbi, I forgot his name. He's a rabbi. What's his name? Jonathan Cahn, right? Who I respect and love his books like The Harbinger and things like that. He's a Jew that has a Jewish church in New Jersey somewhere. He has a whole messianic congregation of Jewish people who are Christians now. So you can't say all Jewish people are the same. You can't demonize all Jews is what I'm saying. And so people with brain rot need to understand that all Jewish people are not alike. And by you grouping them all together is the antithesis of racism and bigotry. Because you don't want all white, that's like saying all white people are racist because of slavery. And I tell black people that all the time, that's not true, right? All white people don't think the same. Now, are there white people that are racist? Yes, but not all of them. And I don't even believe most of them are racist, right? There are segments that are, but you can't group all people together. And I think it's funny because you'll have white people that'll be racist toward Jews, but then they'll get mad when people are racist toward them and make those type of comments. You'll see them when the left accuses them all of being racist and white supremacists, on CNN. The MAGA movement is all racist and white supremacists, and they don't like that. That makes them feel bad, right? That makes them angry. How do you think Jews feel when you call them, when you act like Zionism or AIPAC, which is a whole nother subject? I just don't understand the hatred of AIPAC. I mean, they treat AIPAC like it's a terrorist organization. I'm just like, what is wrong with people? Like, what? AIPAC has been around for a long time. This is like it's a new lobbying organization. I mean, they've supported presidents for a very long time. So yeah.
Reverend Jordan Wells, I want to thank you for your time. It has been an amazing conversation. How can people follow you on social media? How can they purchase your books? And if you want to leave us off with a final message, the floor is yours.
Yeah, we're on X. We're Reverend Jordan Wells on X. We're also on Instagram, Reverend Jordan Wells on Instagram, and we're Reverend Jordan Wells on TikTok and also on Facebook. So you go on there, follow us, and then we get our book, God Stands with Israel. I suggest that everybody goes to buy that copy of that. It's a very, very theological. It talks about anti-Semitism. It talks about if you're just a Christian, even if you're a Christian, you want to defend it. You know, sometimes it's just good to learn more to defend it, to defend your positions. Right. That's the best, and that's my final message. Is the best way to end anti-Semitism. One of the most powerful books I ever read that made me such a Zionist, an outspoken Zionist, was written by mm, a guy I got to meet actually at a faith event that we were all at, which is written by about Bonhoeffer. And the pastor, I forgot his name, but you know him. He wrote the book Bonhoeffer in the movie. I just went and saw it when it came out. And I read the book and I was so impacted by it. And I said, Lord, I want to be a Bonhoeffer to my generation. And when I watched the movie, I had tears. And there were so many Christians that stood by and did nothing, you know, while the Nazis were rising to power. And he tried to warn the church. He tried to warn them, the Christians, that they're coming for you next, right? They just focus on the Jews now, but you're next. It's always the Jews first, and then the people of the cross. And I'm doing the same. And I believe everybody on your channel that hears this has to do the same. The best way to fight anti-Semitism is by raising our voice. Even if you start your own YouTube channel, even if you start your own Instagram, we have to defeat the lies with truth. We have to get on every platform we can get on, and we have to defeat their lies with truth. And I have a book called God Stands with Israel where I debunk every lie that they've used. I debunk the genocide lie that Israel's committed genocide, which they are not. If they wanted to commit genocide, they could do it right now. If they wanted to commit genocide, the population in Gaza has grown since this war started. If they wanted to drop bombs on them and kill everybody, they could turn the entire thing into a parking lot. Israel has some of the most advanced weapons that if they really wanted to pull out some scientific weapons to destroy people, they could. And IDF is very good. And so if they wanted to do it, they could, but they don't want to. They're doing the best they can. Hamas is the real enemy. Hamas is using their own people as shields. They'll kidnap people and they'll bring them into a building where they know there's going to be an attack. They do horrible things like that so they can show the pictures and take pictures and put it all on the internet. Hamas is the real enemy. And so we also talk about Hamas. We talk about Bible prophecy, right? We get into is God's covenant with Israel still for today? Because that's the debate amongst Christians. Is the promises of Israel still, did God forget about Israel because they rejected Jesus? All right. That's what a lot of anti-Semitism starts in the church. They use this notion that because the Jewish people rejected Jesus by large when he came, that God is done with the Jews. But Romans 11 ends that debate. And I go into Romans 11 and I break Romans 11 down like few have. And I have a bachelor's degree in theology. I'm very theological from a accredited seminary. And I show that this is not the truth. God has an eternal plan for Israel. He said that the Israel will be trodden down by the Gentiles until it was a set time, and then God would turn his eye back to Israel. That's what the Bible says, and that's New Testament. And I believe we're in that time now where you're seeing a lot of Jewish people that, in my opinion, that are as a Christian, a lot of people are becoming Messianic Jews. The numbers are crazy. I'm subscribed to a lot of Christian ministries. A lot of Jewish people are giving their life to the Lord, are giving their life to Jesus, the Messiah. So I believe Christians have to be their biggest cheerleaders. We have to choose God over Tucker Carlson. We have to choose the word of God, and we have to get back in the word and say, what does the word say about it? Not what does the internet say? Get off your favorite YouTube preacher, your favorite YouTube clips that telling you this craziness. Get into the word. Open the word. There was a guy who was anti-Semitic. I just interviewed with him. I'm closing. I'm sorry. But he was anti-Semitic. He said he really didn't like the Jews. He really didn't have an opinion, but he wasn't like Tucker Carlson. But he was a Christian. And he said, Pastor Wells, I just decided I was going to open the word and turn out all the noise. He got him a good commentary and he just read the Bible on everything it said about Israel. By the time he said he was finished, he was convinced he was a Zionist. Because if you shut out the noise of Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, and you really get into the Christian scriptures and the Jewish Old Testament, and you read it from front to back, there's no way without noise you can leave thinking that God is done with Israel. There's just no way. And so that's what you need to do. And that's in my book, and you can go on Amazon, God Stands with Israel, Reverend Jordan Wells, get your copy, and I believe you'll be blessed.
Thank you. And, everybody should go out and get the copy of your book. And thank you for everything that you're doing. We appreciate your support, and just wish you the best of success in the future.
God bless you.
Thank you for joining me.